Hey everyone, I'm Phil Albertelli, and this is The Week in Doubt. So, yet another demonic doll episode. This time I'm going to be taking a look at the Labubu craze, and the idea that there's a link between the popular collectibles and my favorite demon slash ancient Mesopotamian deity Pazuzu. And before you accuse me of being a demon worshipper, don't worry, I don't actually believe in the supernatural, but I'm nevertheless fascinated by this kind of stuff. So what exactly is a Labubu? Well, it's a line of collectible figures sold by Beijing-based toy company Pop Mart. The Labubu character, or characters, plural, were created by an artist named Ga-Seng Long. Long was born in Hong Kong, but his family emigrated to the Netherlands when he was 7. From a young age, he was interested in things like fairy stories and mythology. He would eventually go on to create a story series inspired by Nordic folklore called The Monsters, of which Labubu is a part. Apparently, Labubu is both the name of a specific female character as well as the name of the species of mischievous female elfin monsters the character belongs to. Labubu or Labubus are depicted as cute, diminutive, furry creatures with bunny ears and pointy teeth. The collectible figures are often plush, save for the plastic faces, hands, feet, and sometimes inner ears, which kind of makes me think of those old Monchichi toys from back when I was a kid. The figures might look like children's toys, but they're popular with adults as well, including a number of celebrities, like Lisa from Korean girl group Blackpink. I'll pretend I'm familiar with them. Olympic gymnast Simone Biles, Rihanna, Kim Kardashian, as well as her young niece, and apparently even David Beckham, who was gifted one by his daughter, which he wears clipped to his travel bag. And though the figures are often sold as inexpensive blind boxes, meaning you don't know exactly which figure you've gotten until you open it, Pop Mart is still thought of as something of a designer brand, and some Labubu figures can go for quite a lot. A Gulf News article from back in late June has a list of 7 of the most expensive Labubu toys on record. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but I'll give a couple of examples. And I'll go ahead and read the opening paragraph that precedes the list. The world of collectible toys reached new heights in 2025 when rare Labubu figures commanded astronomical prices at auction. These toothy gremlin-like creatures by Hong Kong artist Ga-Seng Long have evolved from affordable blind box toys into investment-grade collectibles, with some selling for more than luxury cars. And number 1 on the list is a human-sized mint green Labubu that sold for $170,000. And then coming in second is a giant brown Labubu sculpture that sold for $132,000 at the same Beijing auction. And then further down the article reads, celebrity endorsements and social media virality have transformed these once affordable blind box toys into serious collectibles, with production runs often limited to 100 to 300 units for special editions. Scarcity drives the astronomical prices seen at recent auctions. I was curious to see how much Labubu figures potentially go for on eBay, and I found some listed for as much as $49,000. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean someone will actually end up buying them for that price, but as someone who has a fair amount of experience with eBay, the fact that these listings have numerous active watchers tells me there are some people out there who are at least considering it. And according to a recent Forbes article, back in July there was a Vans-themed Labubu figure on eBay that had 96 bids and ended up selling for $10,585. But now that we've got that mundane stuff out of the way, let's finally get into the good stuff. The creepy stuff. Here's a bit from a recent NDTV article, NDTV being a New Delhi news outlet. Here's why Labubu dolls are being linked to Mesopotamian demon Pazuzu. Labubu dolls have taken over the world, with celebrities like Rihanna, Cher, and Kim Kardashian adorning them on handbags. The same dolls are now being linked to Pazuzu, a Mesopotamian demon, with conspiracy theories claiming that the dolls carry quote unquote demonic energy. I can't help but picture a contraption at the factory that injects each Labubu with demonic energy as they make their way down a conveyor belt. Joking, obviously, once again, I don't believe in the supernatural. Labubu dolls are unique. They look like rabbits, have toothy grins, and have wide eyes. Inspired by Nordic folklore and mythology, Labubu was created by Hong Kong-born artist, and his name is spelled with a K, so it looks like casing. But as I understand it, I tried to find the proper pronunciation. The K should be pronounced more like a G, and his last name is spelled just like the English word lung, but as I understand it, it should be pronounced more like long, even though it has a U. But anyway, it then goes on to mention that yes, they're made by Beijing-based toy brand Pop Mart. The dolls became a subject of controversy on social media when TikTok users started comparing Labubu to Pazuzu after a now-deleted video showed the doll alongside an AI-generated image of the demon. Some claim the doll's design and quote-unquote vibes were similar to Pazuzu. And a little further down, there's an embedded tweet that caught my attention. It was posted by someone with the X or Twitter handle Labubu Misfits. But why do my lights flicker when I set him down? And then it says, they say if you put 3 Labubus in a triangle, a child laughs in your walls, your toothbrush goes missing, and a bunny ear, but then it gets cut off. And then it has an image which contains 3 images. On the left, it's a typical Labubu doll. In the middle is the AI-generated image of Pazuzu, which... yeah, it's not a great representation of Pazuzu. The biggest difference I see right away is that he only has 2 wings. Pazuzu should have 4 wings. And then on the far right, it has an image of a kind of devil-themed Labubu, a red Labubu with horns and carrying a pitchfork, which to me doesn't really amount to much. Labubu dolls are kind of like Funko Pops. They take that one general template and apply all sorts of themes to it. So just because there's a devil-themed Labubu out there doesn't... I'm saying Labubu a lot. Drinking game if you're not driving and if you're old enough. It doesn't really prove anything. It's like saying there's a devil-themed Funko Pop out there, which there is, and there's also, Cthulhu Funko Pops, or, all sorts of famous cartoon character Funko Pops. Or it's like saying The Simpsons are satanic, because there's a Halloween episode, was it Treehouse of Horror, one of those, where Ned Flanders is portrayed as the devil. And sadly, I know there probably are, people out there somewhere who actually do think The Simpsons are satanic. But I'll continue with the article. What's Pazuzu? Pazuzu is a demon from ancient Mesopotamian mythology, often depicted with a lion face or lion-like face, bird talons, wings, and a serpent. I wonder if they're wording it that way to try to be polite or discreet, or if they're just not aware. But traditionally, I think it's implied that the serpent is actually Pazuzu's phallus, or it's issuing from his genitals or crotch. Despite its fearsome appearance, Pazuzu was sometimes invoked as a protector against other evils, which is true. Meanwhile, some Christian TikTok users have warned against owning Labubu dolls, claiming they're demonic or cursed. However, others have pushed back and slammed the panic. There's a verse that says Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, one user even posted, referring to Corinthians 11:14. And I'm confused as to what point they're trying to make there. Are they implying that Labubu isn't demonic or satanic because it doesn't look angelic? Or that it is demonic because it's trying to hide something sinister beneath a kind of cutesy and innocent facade? I have no idea, but continues the company behind Labubu hasn't publicly addressed the claims, but did post a mock recall notice on April Fool's Day, joking about supernatural activity surrounding the dolls. The link between Labubu and Pazuzu seems to be based on speculation and misinformation, with no concrete evidence to support the claims of demonic connections. I concur strongly, but we also can't rule out good old-fashioned trolling. And the article actually includes such a tweet. And coincidentally, the person's Twitter or X avatar is actually the three-eyed Simpsons mutant fish. And they say, warning, hashtag Labubu isn't a toy, it's a cult, a plush vessel for the demon Pazuzu. Everyone who brings it home signs a contract, especially when they give it to a child. And so I did a minor bit of sleuthing, jumped onto X or Twitter, and found that it is indeed a troll account. The majority of the person's posts are satirical in nature. And then a site called Christianity.com also covered this story, and I thought they had kind of an interesting take. Pazuzu was a demon associated with the underworld in the Babylonian and Assyrian pantheon. Like other Near Eastern gods, Pazuzu was portrayed as relatively amoral, both a destroyer and protector. Worshippers believed that the gods, including Pazuzu, could be manipulated. Offerings, sacrifices, and various incantations could influence the deity's actions for good or ill. Pazuzu, for instance, was often employed against Lamashtu, a female demon who often attacked pregnant women or new mothers. Still, Pazuzu was the king of the wind demons and could bring disease, famine, and other maladies. In biblical perspective, any god other than the Lord is to be avoided, and brief reminder, I myself am an agnostic atheist, I'm not a believer, but anyway, the gods of other Near Eastern nations are inadequate substitutions, constructions of human imagination, pot, kettle, glass houses, for the triune god. In this sense, any association with Pazuzu would be troubling. It continues, unfortunately, it isn't clear that the Labubu is modeled after Pazuzu. Are they weird looking? Absolutely. Overpriced? Definitely. Are they modeled after the ancient Mesopotamian god Pazuzu? Unlikely. Social media users offered relatively uninformed opinions, superficial visual correspondence, and the suggestion that The Simpsons saw this coming to create a fervor around a relatively innocuous toy. In reality, Labubu bears no more resemblance to Pazuzu than previous figures like those depicted in Sendax where the wild things are. I agree. I would actually say Labubu looks more like a Wild Things character than Pazuzu. And there's one last bit, the dangerous response to what's quote-unquote trending. The Labubu crisis isn't, in my estimation, centered on the doll. The doll itself seems relatively benign. Instead, it involves a preoccupation with Labubu that has at least potentially deformative effects, fueled by sensationalism that distorts reality. The doll, as is often the case, is not the problem, but our responses to it. And I suppose that's their way of saying that at the end of the day, it's just an innocent toy, but society's obsession with it is perhaps shallow or superficial or materialistic, or from their Christian perspective, perhaps even borders on being idolatrous. Me personally, as a secular person, I don't have any problem with trends or fads. They tend to be short-lived and run their course. Sometimes they can be annoying, but as long as they're not doing any real harm, who cares? I suppose you could argue that perhaps it's in bad taste or symptomatic that something's wrong with our society when you have wealthy celebrities and the elite buying and flaunting these collectibles, some of which are more expensive than a luxury car or a house down payment. But even then, in a free society, if you can afford to buy something and you want it, I'm not gonna stop you, go ahead. And I want to apologize because I'm reading this article in the form of screenshots, and I believe the paragraph I'm about to read from was supposed to be earlier on, so it may seem kind of out of order. Because I believe the paragraph I just finished reading was actually supposed to be the closing paragraph. But anyway, here we go. Is Labubu just a toy or a spiritual concern worth noticing? Up until a couple of months ago, if you were familiar with Pazuzu, you were probably an expert in Mesopotamian religion or a fan of The Exorcist 1973. Yet the recent Labubu crisis of 2025, it's a whole crisis, has given Pazuzu new life. That's a wild way to put it, like he's resurrected through siphoning Labubu energy. Forgive me for all the fun I'm having with this episode. So is Labubu just a toy or a spiritual concern worth noting? So I want to quickly jump in through the magic of editing to address something. I've mentioned The Simpsons a couple of times now in this episode, and as that Christianity.com article mentions, there are people who are, peddling this whole Labubu Pazuzu thing, who are trying to suggest that this is one of those things The Simpsons predicted. And so back in 2017, I remember seeing it when it first aired, there was yet another Treehouse of Horror episode, and there was a segment of it entitled Exorcist, in which Homer thinks he's ordering a pizza, but he's actually unintentionally ordering a Pazuzu statue. So it comes via Amazon. They put it in Maggie's room, and it ends up possessing Maggie, and it turns into a parody of The Exorcist. But nowhere, and that's basically it. Nowhere in it is there anything that can be seen as being a foretelling of Labubu. And so, yeah, if you're a longtime listener, you're probably aware of my preoccupation with The Exorcist. I watched it on TV when I was a small kid, scared the crap out of me. I had Exorcist nightmares for years. But over time, my fear and resentment of the film turned into a kind of grudging respect, which eventually deepened into a sincere admiration and fondness. I remember as a kid, I was under the impression that the spirit possessing the girl in the film, Regan McNeil, was supposed to be the devil himself. It wasn't until later that I learned it was supposed to be Pazuzu. William Peter Blatty's book, The Exorcist, which the film is based on, Blatty also wrote the screenplay, mentions Pazuzu by name, but the film never does. But we do have the reoccurring Pazuzu imagery throughout the film. First, we have Father Merrin in Iraq, where he discovers the little Pazuzu head amulet, and then his confrontation with the full-body statue. And then later, we see the statue again in the form of a kind of demonic vision. It appears next to Regan as she's kind of rampant in bed, eerily stretching upward as if clawing at the air. The Exorcist 2 does mention Pazuzu by name, but notoriously the film's a bit of a mess, a cash grab sequel with neither Blatty nor director William Friedkin having any involvement. But in closing, do I think Labubu figures are a dark vessel for the ancient Mesopotamian entity Pazuzu? No. Do I think that they were designed to resemble Pazuzu? No on both counts. I think they're what they seem on face value. Cute little trendy collectibles. Not everything is satanic or demonic, and since I don't believe in the supernatural once again, I don't view such things as a threat anyway. So fear not, enjoy your Labubus, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I kind of think they're cool. Someone buy me one. Doesn't have to be one of the expensive ones, maybe a little blind box. But alright, until next time, brothers and sisters, peace out.